Lorraine Whitaker, 70 years old as of noon today. And the candle wax on my cake was still warm when my daughter leaned in and whispered to her husband, "While I distract her, drive back and change the locks." The words were soft as napkin lint, and they clung. The server, Danny, with a tiny star on her wrist, set down my chowder and asked if we were celebrating anything special. I said yes, blew out a crooked 7 and a stubborn 0, and watched the smoke climb. I didn't flinch. I stirred my soup and looked at Cam the way nurses look at monitors when the beeping changes. Reed sat beside her, shoulders squared, already halfway to a plan. In the busy hum of the Silver Finch, Cam ordered salmon in a voice that wanted to sound casual. Reed asked for steak and mentioned door hardware as if locks were a kind of weather. I chose chicken pot pie because it steadies me. When the bill came, I told Danny I'd pay with my card. Cam smiled too quickly and said she knew the manager. "Tonight we'll swing by and help with bills, Mom." She added, softer. I tasted broth and saw the front door on Birch Lane, the pale blue I painted last spring, the key ring warm from my palm. I also saw the new place where I'd slept the past week, the folder of documents on my table, the scaffolding I'd built because I know how families fracture when power turns into love's impersonator. I didn't argue at the table. I let the moment set like plaster and decided what I would do next with the kind of calm I used to keep for code blues at 3 a.m. I felt the old steadiness rise, the one you keep after decades of midnight calls. Suspicion sat beside anger, but did not shove it. I have learned that the first response is a story, and the second is a plan. I tasted salt, smiled at my daughter, and let her believe I had not heard. If they were going to test the edges of my life, they would meet the boundaries I'd already built, quiet, signed, dated, and waiting. We left the restaurant with 2 slices of lemon cake, boxed and sweating through the cardboard. The lot shimmered in the early afternoon light. Reed offered to carry the box. I let him, because sometimes allowing a gesture keeps the peace longer than refusing it. Cam filled the short walk to the car with a story about a student who forgot his lines at the spring musical and turned the mistake into a joke that made everyone clap. She's always been good at finding the pleasant surface of a situation, even when something jagged waits beneath it. The drive to Birch Lane took 7 minutes, the same number of minutes I had spent thinking about those whispered words. Every familiar house along the way looked just a little less innocent. My own home, pale blue with white shutters, waited at the end of the street as though it didn't yet know what was coming. The lawn had gone a bit wild since I stopped caring about perfection, but I loved it that way. Reed carried the cake in first and announced, almost too cheerfully, that the front lock was starting to stick. I told him it had been that way for 30 years and still did its job. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon oil and coffee grounds. Cam settled onto the couch and began sorting through the mail I'd left on the table. Reed disappeared toward the basement, saying something about checking the furnace filter. I watched Cam's face as she skimmed the envelopes, insurance, water bill, a birthday card from a friend who still writes with fountain pen ink. Her expression shifted between concern and calculation, and I knew she was preparing the speech she thought would sound reasonable. She started gently. "Mom, you've had a lot on your plate lately." I stirred honey into my tea and waited. "Mrs. Ortega told me she stopped by the other day and found the stove on." I smiled. I was boiling water for tea, then took a call. She overreacted. Cam sighed, the way a teacher sighs at a student who doesn't understand the lesson. "We just want to help. You know scams are everywhere. One wrong click, and—" She didn't finish. Instead, she took my hand. "Let us handle the bills for a while? Keep things organized." Her voice trembled at the edges, but not from affection. It was the tremble of someone hoping a rehearsed line lands well. I pulled my hand back slowly, Not to reject her, but to breathe. "You're worried about the house," I said. She nodded. "And the accounts." Another nod. "And your peace of mind." She looked startled, as though she hadn't realized the truth was that simple. I told her I understood. Then I said nothing more, because silence is sometimes the only boundary left. Reed returned from the basement with dust on his sleeve and said the furnace was fine, but the door hinges needed tightening. He asked where the ladder was. "Garage," I said. "Left corner, behind the paint cans." He disappeared again, and Cam leaned forward. "Mom, we're not trying to control you. We just want to make sure you're safe." I met her eyes. Safety can look a lot like captivity if you change the locks. Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't argue. The kettle whistled softly. I poured us tea and placed sugar cubes on a small plate. Reed came back carrying the ladder and mentioned that maybe he should call a locksmith friend for a quick check. I told him our homeowner's insurance required advance notice and a licensed contractor from the city list. "Cheaper," he said. I smiled. "Cheaper is expensive when it erases the paper trail." He didn't get the joke. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from the restaurant manager. "Mr. Patel, you left your card. Mrs. Whitaker. We'll hold it at the register." I told Cam I'd drive back to pick it up. "I know the manager," she said, a bit too quickly. "I can handle it." "Thank you, but it's my card," I answered. She didn't insist, though disappointment flickered across her face. We cut the cake and ate in silence. It tasted sweeter than usual, maybe because I knew what I'd built beneath the frosting of ordinary life: contracts, trusts, and contingency plans. Reed mentioned changing the porch light. Cam asked about dinner plans for the weekend. I nodded at both, the polite choreography of family, when they finally left. Reed paused on the porch, scanning the doorframe as though measuring it in his mind. I watched them walk down the path, two figures small against the long evening light. As soon as their car turned the corner, I grabbed my keys and purse. The silver finch was quiet when I arrived. Mr. Patel greeted me with my card and a warm smile. "Happy birthday again, Mrs. Whitaker," he said. "Be careful. Storm's coming." I signed the receipt and thanked him. On the drive back, clouds rolled in from the west. Instead of going straight home, I pulled into the parking lot of the Maple Harbor Police Station. The brick building looked solid and calm, the kind of place built to store order. Inside, the clerk behind the glass window blinked when I handed her a folded document. "A precaution," I said. It was the no trespass notice Alexis had drafted, legal but not accusatory. Simple protection if someone attempted entry without consent. She stamped it, gave me a copy, and wished me a good night. When I reached Birch Lane, the porch light was on. Mrs. Ortega sat outside reading. "Your son-in-law was here measuring something," she called. I waved, but he didn't smile. I thanked her and went inside. The house was perfectly still. I locked the door once, then again, and rested my hand on the cool brass. Ritual, not fear. In the kitchen, I washed the teacups and set them upside down to dry. The clock ticked like a patient heartbeat. For the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Tomorrow, I would start putting things in order, not out of panic, but principle. Tonight, I let the quiet fill the corners and watched the rain begin its soft rehearsal on the roof. By Monday morning, I was in apartment A203, where the hallway smelled faintly of wax and boiled coffee. I had moved a week earlier, a quiet migration from the house on Birch Lane to this smaller place overlooking the harbor. The elevator sighed at every floor as if it, too, had memories it couldn't quite carry. Ethan Coe, the social worker assigned by the court, arrived exactly on time. He shook my hand with both of his, looked me in the eye, and asked if now was convenient. We sat by the window where the light came in, flat and kind. He asked what day it was, who the governor had been when I started nursing, how I would handle a stranger calling about my bank account. I answered each question slowly, not to prove anything, but to hear how steady my own voice sounded. He watched my hands as much as my face, the way good nurses do when they want the truth beyond words. When he asked about money, I explained the alerts I had set up at Riverbank Financial, the dual authorization for large transactions, the automatic transfers to a trust managed by a neutral fiduciary. I told him why I'd sold my house to River Lake Trust and leased it back for 30 days so I could breathe without someone hovering about utilities and repair bills. He nodded, scribbled notes, and asked if I cooked for myself. Mostly, I said, but I'm not above frozen dinners when they behave. He laughed. It was the first easy sound of the morning. After he left, I walked the building to learn its rhythms. The retired teacher 2 doors down with a walker that clicks like a metronome. The man in the baseball cap who waters a spider plant as if it were a pet. I stopped in the laundry room and read a note taped to the dryer. Please clean the lint trap. Thank you. Such small politeness steadies a place. Around dinner time, my phone buzzed. Thursday, court date to make sure you're safe. Cam wrote and added a red heart. I stared at the heart until it blurred. Gratitude and fury sat shoulder to shoulder inside me. I called Alexis Brenner, my attorney, and told her about the message. She said Ethan's evaluation would arrive at the courthouse by morning. The bank was ready to confirm safeguards, and the rest was paperwork and patience. Tuesday arrived with rain that clung to the windows like film. Cam knocked just after lunch, carrying a grocery bag and the smell of cocoa. She tucked her legs beneath her on the couch, like the girl she once was. I don't want you to think we're against you, she said. I'm just scared. You forget things sometimes. The world's cruel to older people. I poured tea into mismatched mugs. Fear's useful, I said, until it starts inventing fires. She looked down. Reed means well. He just wants things secure. Secure for whom? I asked. For all of us, she murmured, then changed the subject to the rain. I showed her the printed statement of my trust account, the emergency fund, the clause that required my written consent for any transfer. Her fingers traced the numbers. You did all this without telling me? I did it because you shouldn't have to worry about me, I said, and because I shouldn't have to worry about you worrying. She tried to smile, failed, and started crying softly. I handed her a paper napkin because I hadn't bought cloth ones yet. The gesture felt both clumsy and right. When she left an hour later, she took half a loaf of banana bread and the schedule for my eye appointment. I watched her cross the parking lot, umbrella tilting like a question. That night, I spread the documents across my table. The trust deed, the leaseback agreement, the sale confirmation, the stamped no trespass filing, the text messages, my own calendar notes. I checked the signatures, the dates, the quiet authority of ink. Each page was a small anchor. Wednesday morning, the rain thickened into mist. I reheated soup and practiced what I might say if the judge asked for reasons. Not speeches, sentences. I wrote one on an index card. Home isn't proof of love, it's a place you learn to leave when it stops being safe. The card went into my coat pocket. In the afternoon, I drove back to Birch Lane to deliver a jar of peach jam to Mrs. Ortega. She sat on her porch, wrapped in a shawl, and said Reed had been around again, measuring the porch rail. He's thorough, I said. He's restless, she corrected, and promised she'd keep an eye out. Back in the apartment, I lined up the documents again, read every word, then stacked them neatly. The folder's weight felt less like defense and more like proof of clarity. The gulls outside the window circled the gray water in patient spirals. When night came, I turned off the lamp, lay in the hush, and felt ready, not hopeful, not angry, just steady. The county courthouse looked like a square-jawed uncle in an old photograph, serious, reliable, and a little tired. I parked in a faded lot between a minivan and a pickup whose bumper read, "Trust in Tools." The sky had finally cleared. I straightened my coat and reminded myself that dignity begins in posture. Alexis met me at the steps, dark hair pinned up, folder in hand. "You ready, Lorraine?" she asked. I told her readiness was a habit, not a mood. Inside. The marble floors echoed too loudly. Reed and Cam sat together on a bench. Cam looked smaller than I remembered, her eyes fixed on the tiled floor. Reed's jaw moved like he was grinding a pebble between his teeth. Judge Ellen Albright took the bench with calm authority, the kind that doesn't need volume to command silence. The clerk called our case. Alexis Rose. Ethan Coe, the social worker, was sworn in first. His voice had the steadiness of someone used to measuring facts. He said I was fully oriented, able to explain my choices, and aware of consequences. He described my apartment as organized, medications managed, finances protected by multiple safeguards. His words landed like stones in a neat path. Cam's attorney followed, trying to stretch worry into evidence. He spoke of the kettle, the fogged window, a supposed missed appointment. Alexis asked permission to cross. She led him gently through the documents, the sale to River Lake Trust, the leaseback clause, the bank safeguards, the dual authorization, the trust fund managed by a neutral party. Each paper clicked into place like a lock closing. The judge nodded once. Mrs. Ortega came next. Her lilac cardigan looked freshly ironed. She testified that she had seen Reed measuring my porch the evening of my birthday and that Cam had twice asked for my spare keys to check for smoke. There had been no smoke. The clerk wrote quickly. Reed looked at the ceiling. When it was my turn, I didn't plan to perform. I told the truth the way I always had at the hospital when a patient asked if it would hurt. I spoke about 39 years of nursing, about signing charts at 3 a.m. when every line mattered, about the house I built one overtime shift at a time. I said I sold it not because I was confused, but because I was clear. I wanted structure, I told the judge, not rescue. Cam's attorney asked if I ever got confused about dates or bills. Sometimes, I said, but I write things down. Writing isn't confusion. It's discipline. He didn't smile. Alexis prompted me to explain the system again. Automatic alerts, spending caps, dual approval for transfers. I told them how the banker who set it up had known me for 20 years, had once cashed my overtime checks by hand. The judge asked one question of her own. Mrs. Whitaker, do you understand that this arrangement limits your daughter's ability to act on your behalf? I do, I said. That's why it works. The courtroom went quiet in the comfortable way truth sometimes earns. Cam looked up, eyes bright and wet. The judge thanked everyone and spoke with deliberate care. Concern is not incapacity, she said. Love is not license. The court denies the petition for conservatorship. Mrs. Whitaker retains full control of her estate. The gavel struck once, and that was that. We stood. Cam hesitated, as if she wanted to speak but couldn't find a sentence that didn't betray both of us. Reed muttered something about safety, and Alexis reminded him softly that changing locks on a sold property could be considered trespassing. He turned away. Cam followed him out, shoulders tense, a child caught between guilt and pride. Alexis squeezed my elbow. You handled that perfectly, she said. I just answered the questions. That's all perfect ever means, she replied. In the hallway, sunlight filtered through the tall windows, catching in the dust that hung like fine snow. I waited until Cam's footsteps faded, then walked slowly toward the doors. My reflection in the glass looked older but lighter, as if someone had erased the outline of a burden I'd forgotten to set down. Outside, a gust of wind lifted the edge of my scarf, and for the first time in months, I let it. Back at apartment A203, the hallway light flickered once before steadying itself, like the building was breathing with me. I placed the purple folder on the table and opened the blinds. The lake below was a sheet of pewter, calm and sure. I boiled water, poured tea, and sat for a long moment listening to the hum of pipes, the ordinary music of a place that owed me nothing. My phone buzzed. A message from Cam appeared on the screen. "Can I come by?" Beneath it, a picture of a greeting card that read, "Fresh starts." I typed back, "Yes, bring your appetite." She arrived half an hour later, cheeks pink from the wind, holding a bouquet of tulips wrapped in newspaper. "They were on sale," she said, as if needing to apologize for hope. I put them in a glass pitcher because I still hadn't unpacked my vases. We sat at the small kitchen table where the sugar bowl always slides to the same corner. Between us, the purple folder rested closed, neither invitation nor warning, just a fact of life. Cam cleared her throat. "I'm sorry," she began. I thought I was helping. Reed thought so too, but I let fear get ahead of trust. She twisted the hem of her sleeve like she was trying to unmake the last few weeks. I let her talk. Sometimes silence is the only proof you're listening. When she finally stopped, I said, "Fear's not the problem, honey. Fear keeps us checking the stove. It's when fear starts rewriting other people's stories that it turns cruel." Her eyes filled, but she nodded. "So where do we go from here?" I slid a sheet of paper across the table. At the top it said, "Our boundaries." Below were 2 columns, uneven but honest. "You can drive me to the eye appointment," I said. "But you'll wait outside so the doctor talks to me directly. You can scan the old photos for backup, but the originals stay with me. You can hold the spare key only if I ask, not assume." Cam smiled through her tears. "Fair. And me," I continued, "I'll stop thinking every offer of help is a trap. I'll try to let you love me the way you can, not the way I wish you would." We signed our names at the bottom. No witnesses, no notary, just ink, breath, and the fragile truce of family. We had banana bread and more tea. She asked about Mrs. Ortega and laughed when I told her the woman had already promised to scare off Reed with a broom if he came measuring again. The laughter loosened something in both of us. When Cam stood to leave, she hesitated at the door. "Do you hate me?" she asked. I shook my head. "I don't hate you. I hate what fear made you do. But that's a smaller thing than love." She hugged me, awkward, unexpected, real, and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." After she left, the apartment felt full rather than empty. I washed the cups, wiped the counter, and opened the window a few inches. The air from the lake slid in, cool and clean. Birch Lane existed now only on paper, a line in a trust file, and that was all right. A house is a tool. So is a lock. So is a boundary spoken aloud. I placed the signed paper under the sugar bowl where we'd written our names. The tulips leaned toward the window, their stems drinking greedily. I turned off the light and caught my reflection in the glass, older, unshaken, wholly mine. I whispered goodnight, to her and to me, and listened to the steady heartbeat of pipes and wind and the life I had chosen. Finally, without permission. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.